everyone. Good afternoon and good morning if it's applicable. It's a matter of great happiness to be chairing this session and of the 3-day international webinar. In this first technical session, we have the plenary speaker and 4 presenters. I think we are already running behind schedule. The plenary speaker is Dr. Safa Hassan Ahmad Al-Haddad, Assistant Professor of Translation, University of Sana'a, and she has a PhD in translation. Her PhD addresses the translation assessment field with the title Evaluation and Quality Assessment of Arabic Translation of Toni Morrison's novel Beloved in the light of Julian House's model. Dr. Safa Hassan is an assistant professor at the University of Sana'a, teaching analysis of translation mistakes and literary translation. She is also Dean of the Development and Quality Accreditation at the University of Modern Sciences. She has worked as a lecturer for a number of translation courses and a trainer in the field of teaching for more than 15 years. Her topic here is translation quality assessment models between theory and practice. With great pleasure, let me invite Dr. Safa Hassan Ahmad Al-Haddad for the speech. Over to you, Dr. Safa.
Thank you, Professor. Good morning, dear professors and colleagues. It's my honor to be with you here in this 3-day international webinar on 5 T's. The subject of my today's talk is of great interest to those who are interested in the field of translation quality assessment. The subject of my today's talk is translation quality assessment, models between theory and practice. My talk is going to cover the following topics. I will start with brief introduction. I will start with brief translation quality assessment with some basic concepts. Moving to the approaches to translation quality assessment. Then I will present the major models to translation quality assessment, the most influential, definable, testable models. Then I will put one of them in practice, that is Julian House's model. I will conclude my talk with the applicability of translation quality assessment. This plenary talk aims at presenting one of the interestingly crucial issues in translation studies, that is translation quality, particularly when it comes to narrowing the gap between theory and practice in relation to translation quality assessment models. The talk also offers an interesting introduction to the linguistic approaches that provide a sophisticated orientation to translation quality assessment models, underlining how translated texts are evaluated. Let me first find the definition of quality assessment. In the scholar field of translation, they milestone attempts to find a workable tool to evaluate and assess translated texts. They try to define the term translation quality, and they find it a problematic area and an unanswered question, a complex task to be achieved. But we can say that translation quality assessment is the process of assessing the quality and showing the judgment on translated texts. Many scholars in this field, there are a number of scholars, just I have mentioned the major ones. We have Professor Nord and West in 1971. We have Julian House, her model theory in 1981. We have Malcolm Williams. We have Kenai of translation quality assessment to assessing the texts was effective and more to enhance translated texts and to raise awareness of semantic and pragmatic. The approaches to translation quality assessment, and I have brought to you the major ones that are related to the most and the major translation quality assessment model standards. Those are four. The first one is the sites with the mentalist views. Here, the assessment is based on subjective views on the translators, on feelings and emotions. The second is response-based approaches. Here, this approach with the previous behaviorist views is based on dynamic equivalence or equivalence of response. And this is related to NIDA in 1964. The problem with this approach is that the source text is disregarded in the evaluation. The third one is the functionalistic approach with the Scopus views. And already Professor Nord had given us valuable insights into this approach. The analysis here and the evaluation here is based on the function and the purpose of the text. So the comparison and evaluation is based on mainly on the first. The fourth one is text and discourse-oriented approaches with the descriptive translation studies views. Here we have House, Julian House. She based her model on this particular approach. The evaluation here is based on the function and the form of the both texts inside the system of the target text culture. Now let us move to the major models that that many studies have conducted in the field of translation evaluation and translation quality assessment. We have the first one, that is RES model. It was the modified one, appeared in 2000. She has proposed a model with the following parameters. We have the first one, the linguistic analysis. The evaluation starts with the linguistic analysis of the source text and target text, moving to the determination of the text type, then analyzing the extra-linguistic determinants, comparing the source text and target text in the terms of the previous parameters, reaching to the critic evaluation. The second model is Christina Nord model that appeared in 1997. She bases her model on the evaluation and analysis on the independence factors, the intratextual factors and extratextual factors. In the intratextual factors, the evaluator should focus on the subject matter, content, presuppositions, text composition, non-verbal cues, and the effect. In the extratextual factors, we analyze the sender, the intention, the recipient, the medium, place, time, motif, and text function. The third model is Julian House's model, which first, as I told you, the first version appeared in 1971. In 1990, modified version appeared in 1997, and the last one, which I have brought to you today, is the last version, which appeared in 2050. The evaluation procedures in assessing the quality of the translation starts by performing a source text profile and target text profile. Here, the first step is performing a register analysis that includes field, tenor, mood for developing a source text profile. Then the evaluator should describe and specify the source text genre, then provide a statement of function to the source text related to the additional and interpersonal meaning. Then the same process should be done again, performing a logistical analysis, toner and mood, but not to the source text, but to the target text profile, describing the text genre, and then providing a statement of quality. So the comparison of the source text and target text profiles include the previous steps. Then we need to classify the errors. House give us categorizes the avert erroneous errors. After classifying the errors, we need to categorize the translation, whether it has been translated correctly or overtly. The last step here in Julian House's model is providing a statement of quality that results from the above steps. Her model could be summarized in this diagram. We have the individual textual function, which is divided into two. We have the register parameter, and we have the variable subject social action. In toner, we have participation relationship that includes author's provenance, social relationship, social attitude, and participation. In mood, the focus is on the medium and connectivity. Now, let me put this model in practice. I have briefly applied this model in practice. This is going to be the application of Hafsa's model to translation quality assessment on the Arabic translation of Beloved by Toni Morrison. As I told you, it starts by doing a source text profile. So I have already done a source text profile and target text profile. Then I have compared, and this is the result of the comparison. So here, for example, in the field focuses on the subject matter. So since what is the subject matter of this very novel? The subject matter, of course, Beloved by Toni Morrison, talks about slavery, mother's love, and supernatural, the dehumanization that African American people have been going through. The analysis regarding the subject matter compares how subject matter has been presented and how it has been rendered in the target text. It concerns how the main themes are presented and rendered lexically and semantically, pragmatically in both texts. Here I gave you an example from both texts. The source text here says, early June, when her mother and grandma super after chores, the blank color before gears changed to evening occupations. في وقت مبكر من العصر عندما كانت أمها وجدتها تخففان مراقبتها قبل العشاء مباشرة بعد أداء أعمالهما الساعة الخالية قبل أن تتغير تعشيقة التروس إلى أعمال مسائية. As it can be observed here when comparing the source text and the target text, the idiomatic phrase before gears change had been treated literally in the target text, causing a distortion in the meaning of the target text. The meaning becomes unclear and the aesthetic value is lost, confused because the mental image, the meaning is not clear. So the target text author, the translator, should have known that idiomatic expressions do not make sense when they are interpreted in a literal manner. The second dimension in Hafsa's model is toner. Again, I have compared the source text and target texts in terms of this dimension. The variables in this dimension include the personal stances of source text author and target text author, social role relationship, social attitude, and participation variables. I'll just cover here the the personal stances of both writers. I have brought to you this example, the lexical differences. The source text says, so when I knew would be wandering and smoking and I couldn't see after him, well, I go. The source text has been rendered as ولذا عندما كنت أعرف أننا سنقتل ونقوم بالتكفير وأنني لم يكن بوسعي أن أراقبه حسنا كنت أحضر حبلا وأربطه حول كاحله. The present passage shows one of the most effectively and emotional passages in the source text. It describes how African American people were harshly treated. Their masters catch them, kill them, and then burn them. This reflects one of the most important themes of the source text, that is slavery, traumatic history, and torture. It as well presents the source text author personal and emotional stance. How is the source text author, that is Toni Morrison, emotional or presents this painful past? Nevertheless, the translator seemed to lack linguistic to present the experience as it is meant to be. He translated the gerund smoking inadequately into tabkhir, which is literally means steaming. So how could the killed one be killed and then wake up again and do some kind of steaming? So there is a miscorrespondence in this emotional stance, and thus mismatches arise at this level. So if we agreed with Lister, 2009, page 18, confirms about the novels of Toni Morrison that they recreate a particular feeling or experience in the mind of the reader, then we can assure that no particular feeling or nor experience are created in the mind of the target text. This very expert, as the meaning has been not presented as it to be. Toner, regarding the emotional stances, include the lexical differences and syntactic differences. I give you one example regarding the lexical differences. Now I move to the syntactic differences. We have this excerpt. The source text, they never spoke, beloved listened, and the two did create what really happened and how it really was. The rendering of the source text is كانت دينيفر تتكلم ومحبوبة تصدع وبذل الاثنان ما بوسعهما حتى يحاكيا ما حدث بالفعل. Here the focus is going to be on the gender agreement regarding markers. The noun phrase the two in the source text refers to dual feminine, that is deliver and beloved, both feminine. Thus, according to the syntactic nature of the target language, this phrase has to have the dual feminine marker ta. So it has to be an ithnatan instead of an ithnan. Similarly, the verbs badala and yuhakiya must be inflected for feminine markers, since they must agree with two female nouns. The third dimension in register analysis includes mode, which include two variables, medium and connectivity. By medium and connectivity, HAPS means coherence and cohesion. The example I have put to you concerned coherence and cohesion. This shameful that had spit into a slit in her mind, right behind the slap on her face and the circled cross. The translation was شيئا مخزيا بصورة شخصية تسرب إلى داخل شق في عقلها تماما خلف الصفعة على وجهها والصليب الذي تحيط به دائرة. This is the evaluation here considers cohesion and coherence, which causes a bridge from the target language system. The sentence in the target text is ill-structured as a result of factors, the lack of cohesion and coherence due to the bridge from the target language system. The target text author had poorly produced the sentence in a very weak structuring. The structural organization is neither acceptable nor understandable by the target text reader. The ambiguity is raised here because of the illogical sequence of ideas. The translator should know that the target language text is supposed to be identical to the source language in terms of content, style, effect, but at the same time, it has to respect the rules and norms of the target language. The second parameter after we analyze the gender, which includes, as I told you, field, toner, and move to the second parameter, genre. This study, in fact, has dealt with literary genre, where both of them are written in the form of novel. But texts in this are characterized by certain formal traits and especially length. Both of source text and target text have almost the same length. However, they are not similar in keeping the other formal traits at the same literary level, where the use of prose in its natural flow can be considered one of these rapidly affected traits. Analyzed a number of these traits, figurative language, similes, metaphors, and so on, but no time to present them all. The classification of errors, after we analyze the errors, and in this study they are more than we have to classify them into overtly erroneous errors or covertly erroneous errors. The errors that were found in this study were overtly in nature, and they are divided into the following four types. We have the not translated, the slight and rich from the target language system. In House's model, the last step in evaluation is a statement of quality. The evaluator should do the last analysis here. I give you here a source, a line from the source text and its translation regarding statement of quality. We have this from page 78 from Harrison, from Beloved. Things rub and it was hot. The translation was كانت الأشياء تصبح على ما هي عليه. الكآبة تبدو كئيبة والحرارة تبدو حارة. The analysis of the source text and target text has revealed a number of mismatches along both the additional and interpersonal functions. The additional function focuses on the mismatches resulted in the linguistic analysis, where the interpersonal function shows the value of judgment related to the personal stances. The last point here is the applicability of translation quality assessment models. One of the major advantages of these scholarly models is that they are based on the principle of seeking a solid empirical ground for assessing the nature of translation quality. However, some of the scholarly models to translation quality assessment do not provide an overall statement to quality, nor they indicate whether all the assessment parameters are of the same significance or not, which make determining translation quality imprecise or vague. Accordingly, there is no explanation on how to judge the overall of a translated text if it performs strongly on some parameters but not on others. Some of the translation quality assessment models are laborious and confusing. It takes the evaluator a long time to study, connect, and apply the assessment parameters or tools. It loses easiness and clarity. Besides, the focus, the assessment is not clear and not obviously observed. Thus, translation, the assessment factor is another, the timing factor is another shortcoming of these models, since it takes, for example, the canine, who has a model, 16 pages to evaluate a text with 300 words. The last point, many of the translation quality assessment models are difficult to apply. Moreover, the application of these models using parameters.
Yeah.
We are running out of time.
Yeah. She's closing, I suppose.
Yeah, we don't have time for discussion because out of time. We have one more technical session, sir. So please.
Okay.
And I request our chair to proceed with paper presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are running short of time. So the next paper, the first of the 4 papers, is by Preeta PV, non-vocational teacher in English, Government VHSS, Vidura, Kerala, India. Her topic is Words Without a Perfect Replacement, an attempt to understand untranslatability. Over to you, Ms. Preeta. Okay, please start.
Hello, am I audible to all?
Yeah, I think we can. Hear.
Yes. So, distinguished persons across the globe, a good day to one and all. Yes, I'll be talking about words without a perfect replacement, a humble attempt to understand untranslatability. And well, not taking in much time, I go directly to certain topics. And yes, the first one on the slide is what actually is translation? It goes without saying that translation is a process of translating words or text from one language to another. And we all know translation is as old as language itself. And there is another interesting part. You find that trade between countries, spreading of messages, usually religious messages and great ideas, have and to just add on, myself coming from a state like Kerala, you find that had it not been for the translation of Communist Manifesto, which turned up sometime during the 1960s, we wouldn't just have the Kerala Renaissance, which we talk about in detail then. Okay, so then as we move further on, we go to a very brief historical perspective of what translation actually has gone through. Now, there is Eric Jacobson who states that translation is a Roman invention. And that is why I just started my slide with the word Cicero and Homer. You find that Cicero and Homer, they went on, they had 2 concepts. One was a word for word or an interpreter concept, and the other one was a sense for sense or an orator concept. And they believed that the second one was better. Even we would feel so. And from the Roman part, if you count, you understand that in the history of translation, there is a surge of Bible translations that happen. The word of God had to be spread around in different languages. So the Bible, which was originally in ancient Hebrew and Aramaic, had to be translated into Greek. And that is actually seen to be the first translation ever, and we call it the Septuagint. And from the Septuagint, we got it translated later into Latin by Saint Jerome in 4th century, which came to be called as the Vulgate or the Common Man's Bible. And then on, we have the English translations by John Wycliffe, William Tyndale, and also the most quoted King James Version. Now, moving on, you have the Renaissance coming. And as you all know, Renaissance is a period of revival. So in the 16th century, or maybe if I talk in on a larger scale, the 16th and the 17th centuries were a period of exploration and conquest. So colonies were produced, and you find that language became the part of the power base, or maybe something of which the conqueror mode. And this hegemonic structure is still prevalent in English. That is something we cannot deny with. And coming on, you find that at that time you had Plutarch's translation by Norton, Petrarch, Virgil, all these adaptations gave a very different tone to the whole structure of literature. And then we have Dryden coming in and talking about what the three types of translations are in the 17th century. He places it very clearly, the three types. You know, even you can attach yourself when I speak those words. The one is metaphrase, which means word to word. The second one is paraphrase, which means more of a sense type. And the third one is the base level imitation. So as we all understand, even he preferred, the people of his times preferred the paraphrase structure. Then moving on, in the 18th century, the translator was more of an artist with a moral obligation. And it is there that you find Fraser coming up with the principles of translation. And the three principles of translation still find rooted in our translation studies even now. He went on to say that the translator should have an idea of the original work. The style and manner of writing should reflect the original. The translator should possess the ease of the original translation. And now moving on, it is in the 19th century that for the first time, the issue of translatability and untranslatability surfaces. And it is here that we have Schleiermacher's, the German theorist, seminal paper putting in the difference. It is here the talk is being very clearly stated, and you find that Schleiermacher went on to say it is either the translator leaves the writer alone and moves on to the reader, or he leaves the reader alone and the writer approaches the reader. So these are all path-breaking things. And when you come over to the 20th century, translation has more or less become a course of teaching and language learning in institutions. There are a whole lot of methods that are adopted, the grammar translation method, the cultural method, the text-based translation method and all. And in the 20th century, among the pioneers, you have Eugene Nida's dynamic equivalence theory taking in the forefront. And in here, you find that he states it very clearly. A translator should translate in such a way that the effect of translation on the target reader is roughly the same as the effect of the source text which once had or made on the source reader. And from Nida's dynamic equivalence theory, you find there are so many technological advancements, and translation has become more or less too much on the anvil. There is so many, internet is playing in so many things. There is cinematographic translations, audiovisual translation, screen translations, and whatnot. So I have understood over the days of my study that the two main approaches to translation would be the ones that I've just shown on the slide, to express the content and meaning of each and every word and phrase as in the original, and secondly, to produce an output that though it is a translated piece, it dons in a new dress with the same ease as it is in the original composition. And if we have gone through any translated pieces, we understand that a good translator performs this task, and where and when these approaches intermingle, we cannot basically find out. So now moving on from the approaches, I go to the question in hand, what is untranslatability? It actually is a property of a text or of any utterance in one language when there is no equivalent text or utterance in another language. And actually, this is something that all of us speak volumes about. And we have theoreticians who have spoken at length about it. I have three of them placed on my slide, and let's go through them. You have Catford, John Catford, one of the leading 20th century theoreticians, talking about linguistic untranslatability and cultural untranslatability. What are those? Now, take for I am a Malayali. So for me, my mother tongue, the translations that I get in from the mother tongue is the easiest one to attach myself with. And you find that in a language called Malayalam, you have a very distinct syntactic structure. You have the SOV pattern. But when I say that, I think I need to add on with an example. Please bear with it. There is a common statement that I use in class, Raman Ravanane Kunnu. I'll give you the English translation. It's easier to understand. Rama killed Ravana. Okay, so over here you understand that when I spoke about the Malayalam sentence, it was a subject, object, verb form, the SOV structure. But when it comes to the English mode, it is subject, verb, object. So there is this linguistic untranslatability that creeps in the pattern of syntactic structures. Okay, and then there is also cultural untranslatability.
Miss Prida, we have to wind up quickly.
Yes, I'll just carry on, make it fast. There is this cultural untranslatability that is actually given through cultural gap and cultural conflict also. And you find that cultural untranslatability is implied in all translations. Now, next, what I had studied was, I took in scrutiny 2 pieces of poetry that were there in the text. One is actually the one you find called Vikka. It is Stammer, which is a transcreation by the poet himself. And the other one is a piece of poetry by Chemanam Chako called Nella, which is translated as rice. And you find that in this, the first case, transcreation, the author himself takes in the liberty, and more things are well managed. There is not much hiccups anywhere. But when it comes to a translation by another poet himself, you find there is retention, replacement, synonyms, literal translations, and even naturalization that happens. Now, you cannot give away with untranslatability. People who are in for untranslatability goes in for Wordsworth's misquoted statement, poetry is what gets lost in translation. So it is a question that we all ask. Are we able to translate culture? Can a writer who uses an idiomatic language ever be translated in another way? These are definitely difficult ones to answer with. But you can't just say you can't just say yes to translatability because you can't say yes to untranslatability because there are the heap of arguments for it are more. We should always remember that how does a Malayali understand a Spanish writing? How is Marcos known to us? How is Neruda known to us? Across the world, people don't sit and read the Spanish works. They go in for the English counterparts. So you understand that the utopian statement of every culture being influenced by other countries' literature is eminent, it's there, it's a fact and all. So translators are the actual first multiculturalists, and this is actually quoted by the US poet laureate in one of his famous speeches. Now, there is another thing that you talk about. What is poetry? Poetry is something that you attempt from the impossible.
Excuse me, we are
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you have to.
Okay, I'll just take one more slide and I'll end my speech, sir.
Okay,
Thanks
okay.
anyway. Okay, so poetry itself is going for something impossible. So if a poet is trying to convey something small or convey something big through the limited version of a lyrical mode, you can say that even untranslatability is pardonable. And for my understanding, I understand that translator is another creator, a creator who goes in for trying out different phrases, different idiomatic usages and all. And from this creator mode, you understand that translation is actually transformation. A transformation which is not just a mere reproduction, a process of pure, beautiful transformation. And to end with, I would say that even translators are poets. I intend to borrow words from Dryden and even the Armenian poet Yeshie Karantas, who says that poetry must be translated by a poet. So if we have a creator approximation of the original in a translated piece, it means that there is a perfect jugalbandi happening. And
Okay,
thus,
thank you, thank you,
translation
thank you,
becomes art. Thank you.
thank you.
Respected, respected chair,
Yeah.
respected chair and Sana ma'am. Actually, we are really sorry, Safa ma'am, because we are running out of time. We have one more technical session, and I request our chair Yasin Ashraf sir to ma'am, please remain in the session. And after this 3 technical paper presentation, we will provide you a 10 minutes time for your discussion and interaction. And we are really apologize for that. And please, chair, take into account this matter also.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sir, proceed with another paper.
Thank you. Moving on. The second presenter, Dr. Raja Lahiani, UAE, teacher, author of a book and many articles. The topic of her presentation is Arabic redundancy, traveling to the West. Is the voyage safe? Dr. Raja, please.
I don't know if I should say good morning or good evening or good afternoon to everybody. So hello, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Perfectly, right.
Okay, thank you. So as you were just saying, my presentation is entitled Arabic Redundancy, Traveling to the West. And then the basic investigation here is whether the voyage is made safe through translation. So these are the contents of my presentation, and I hope that I will make it as short as the requested 20 minutes. I will start by reminding that literary translation is fundamentally the translation of style, and that the formal aspects making up style not only deliver information, but also shed light on the author's state of mind and attitude, and make up a unified standard repertoire for literary tradition into language. Style is, of course, governed by choice, and the style that a translator chooses is subject to all manner of constraints and influences that they may be only faintly aware of. Style is the seed of the literary, and literariness is governed by the writer's structural and verbal choices and the literary tradition that they work within. Style is also culturally and historically variable. The translator reconstructs the source text intended message by reconciling meaning effect such as the source text author adopts alternatives from a repertoire, excuse me. So the translator reconstructs the source text intended message by reconciling message effect, much as the target source text author adopts alternatives from a repertoire of present ways of expression to build certain aesthetic, literary, or narrative effects. Here, this is basically from Koster 2014 and Bates-Boyer 2017. The source text's original receivers are in general expected to be familiar with its background and thus should not fail to complete on their own the message that the poet intends. Translated poetry requires more effort by the reader to create a context supporting interpretation, and thus the translation process can be considered, I quote from Bates-Boyer 2020, to have enhanced the intensified many of the poetic elements of the source text stylistic study of translated texts. Might be expected to find that such texts possess literariness to a high degree. Now I move to my case study. In the study, I consider a verse line from a canonical pre-Islamic poem, which is the Mu'allaqa of Tarafa. The Mu'allaqat here, if I very briefly explain this to non-Arabic speakers, this is a compilation of canonical poems that were composed in pre-Islamic Arabia. They are believed to be 7, although some scholars believe that they were rather 10. Now, this poetry is oral poetry. A poem is made up of two hemistichs. The hemistichs are logically connected, and also the verse lines in a whole poem are logically connected as well. This poetry is also a very condensed poetry. It is known to be a very, very crafty poetry. It is musical, and it is characterized by its use of the mono rhyme scheme. The poet here, who is Tarafa, composed his mu'allaqa to seek pardon for his feckless deeds and to reflect his adherence to muruwa. Muruwa is a pervasive, totalizing ideal in pre-Islamic Arabia, reflected in all the mu'allaqat, which encompassed all the virtues that would preserve one's tribe's honor, helping the needy, protecting the weak, defending honor, offering shelter to nomads, and tribal solidarity as well. The poet Tarafa here asserts his adherence to muruwa at both the personal and the tribal levels. He announces in verse line 73 that if summoned to defend his tribe, he would be ready. And here we go. So this is the verse line that I'm adopting for as a case study in my research work. So وإن أدعى للجلا أكن من حماتها وإن يأتيك الأعداء بالجهد أجهدي. This is my quite literal translation of this verse line. If summoned for a great cause, I will be one of its defenders. And if the enemies assault you, I will strive hard to defend you. The source text uses pleonasm, which is a semantically redundant expression that repeats a meaning. Repetitiveness is characteristic of oral poetry. The context vindicates the poet's pleonasm. This is Tarafa's bitter lamentation at being rejected by his tribe, contrasting his exclusion with the truth that he is in a set that the tribe should not sacrifice. The source text is forthright. It uses simple lexical elements, and these acquire intensity by means of the sounds embedded in them, and therefore the pleonasm, the redundancy used, highlights the poem's appeal. Arabic is considered as a language that tolerates repetition in its different forms to a considerable extent. Rhetorical and stylistic norms in English do not tolerate as much repetition. Leach considers the use of pleonasm in English to be a culpable form of redundancy, so not so much welcome in English. Repetition is usually avoided in English, but it has certainly been used to a great extent. Thus, the difference is not that it's not a rhetorical device in other languages, but that it is heavily used in Arabic, and it is functionally used in Arabic as well. This verse line that I've just quoted will be acceptably translated not by a linguistic equivalent, but rather by an effective stylistic equivalent that would capture and convey the same appeal as the source text with a similar degree of literariness. This study investigates whether pleonasm as a literary device bears a stable value and is thus conventionalized and static, or whether it is dynamic and hence aesthetic and functional. Now, unfortunately, because of the time restriction, I did not manage to include the comparative work that I did in my research, but I would be very happy to share with you the findings of the research. Just please have a look at the corpus that I managed to gather. It is a corpus of 7 translations. The time in which the translations were produced is from 1782 to 1993. Interestingly to me, 5 of the translations are done into verse and just the first 2 are done into prose. Now the conclusions. The translation procedures adopted by the translators in the corpus fall into a pair of dichotomous categories: avoidance, and the addition of lexical and semantic repletion. Opting for one rather than the other is governed by translational norms, general translation tendencies, or the translator's awareness or unawareness of the source text's stylistic features. Translators generally aim to create an explicit and transparent target text by canceling repetition, avoiding redundancy and pleonasm, usually in an attempt to implement the target language poetics. The processes of intercession and mitigation exercised by some translators can help explain this tendency in translational language towards intervention to restore the balance between avoidance of repetition and the explicative function of the addition of repetition. A translation that seeks to reproduce all the stylistic features of the source text is generally doomed to produce only a deceptive correspondence, as absent selective appropriation in translation, literariness, as well as message will not be in evidence. Translated poetry is expected to speak for its original. It is undeniable, though, that this poetry needs to adhere to the aesthetics and poetics of the target language, if it aspires to motivate readership in the receiving milieu. A translation that attempts to document the source text aesthetic choices is not expected to achieve a great deal. The pleonasm depicted in the source text does not bear a stable value by the end. It is dynamic, aesthetic, and functional. Only those translators who perceived this feature were able to reflect the functional aesthetics inherent in the source text and at the same time reconcile them to the aesthetics of the receiving language. Thank you very much. So
Thank you.
I just finished that. If you have any questions, here is my email address. It would be my pleasure to receive any feedback. Thank you so much. I hope that I'm within the time limit.
Almost, Dr.
Almost.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pity we can't take questions just now, but maybe there will be time. Okay, now we are moving on to the third presenter, Ola Mansour Al-Babli, research scholar, Ibn Zafar University, Morocco. The topic is language contact theory in translation. Over to her. Yeah, can you hear me? Ola Mansour Al-Babli. Okay, what's happening?
Mr. Ola Mansour, are you there? Sir, please once again check whether he is available.
Or shall we please call the next person and
We'll call the next presenter, then we will check him also.
yeah, we'll come back. Okay, the next presenter, I suppose, presenter is Dr. Ali Al-Griani, Assistant Professor of Linguistics and Translation Studies, Department of English Language and Literature, Zafar University, Salalah, Oman. His topic is on the translation of linguistic landscape. Dr. Ali.
Right. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
we can.
Okay. Uh, just a minute. I'd like to share the presentation. It says that the host disabled participant screen sharing. So how can I share my screen?
Can I start? Ola.
Please, you have to wait. We have started the next
Okay.
speaker.
Okay.
Yeah, I cannot share my screen because the host
Yeah,
did not enable that.
Mr. Isa, can we do something about this? Probably there's something you have to do.
Hello,
Yeah.
Dr. Ali, you can manage.
Okay, now it's fine. I can share it. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay, now. Right. So how much time do I have? 10 or 20 minutes?
10 minutes, sorry. 10 minutes only.
Okay, I'll do my best to do it within 10 minutes. Right. So today I'm going to talk about the translation of linguistic landscape, as you can see. And in this presentation, I will start by defining the concept of linguistic landscape. And then I will look at the linguistic landscape as a translational space. And then I will talk a bit about the current study in terms of its issue, aims, and methodology. I will also talk about the locale of the study, the linguistic situation in the locale of the study. And later I'll present the analysis of public science translations, and will end the presentation with the conclusion. Okay. Okay, so defining linguistic landscape. The term linguistic landscape was introduced by Landry and Paris in 1997, and it is used to refer to language texts, which are displayed on public road signs, for example, place names, commercial signs, advertising billboards, and signs on government buildings. And recent studies such as Ray, Ben Raphael, Corter, and Backhouse studied linguistic landscape from different perspectives. So for example, some studies focused on language use, others on language policy, language identity, language ideology, language awareness, and public sphere, etc. This study takes a different track as it studies linguistic landscape from a translation perspective. And thus it is in line with the other studies such as those of, okay, just, okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, such it's in line with other studies such as those of Al-Kharabsha, I guess, 2008, and Al-Thawri, 2014. Right, so the linguistic landscape as a translational space. The public sphere has been always a welcoming space for transmitting information, whether bilingual or multilingual. And that can be done actually if you had the use of public science, particularly in places or settings where multilingual and multi-ethnic communities exist. So in such a situation, translation plays a very important role, not only to make communication possible between people belonging to different linguistic and cultural backgrounds, but because it shapes the linguistic landscape of a given locale, giving rise, of course, to the emergence of translational space. So in societies where migrants, for example, and expatriate labor force reside, for example, in the Gulf region here, translation is not only desirable, but it is vital. It is really important. Okay, given that the city is a place of language contact where translated public science is manifested. Right. The current study, what is it about? What are the aims and the methodology? So the current study examines the linguistic landscape, as I said, of one particular city, which is the city of Salalah here in the Sultanate of Oman, from a translation perspective. And it basically aims to identify the translation strategies adopted in translating public science and assess the quality of public science translations as to whether or not such translations are appropriate for their target readers. As far as the methodology of the study is concerned, following other linguistic landscape studies, such as Gotha, Packhouse, among others, digital photography was used to compile a corpus of 100 digital photos of non-official public, bilingual public science, which represent translation content. And most of the science are science of commercial nature, in the sense that they are science which can be found on, for example, shops, restaurants, cafes, pizzerias, and other commercial places. And the data was analyzed according to two parameters or two criteria, namely, as I said earlier, the translation strategy used in translating public science, and the quality of public science translations as to whether or not such translations are adequate, informative, and communicative. Right? So now I'll talk a bit about the linguistic situation in Salalah, the locale of this city. So Salalah is a main city situated in the governorate of Dhofar in the south of Oman. And it comprises a large number of expatriate communities of diverse linguistic, social, cultural, educational, and economic backgrounds. And given that large portions of expatriates don't speak Arabic, okay, the prevalence of English as a lingua franca and the role of English translations have been significantly increasing in the region. Other languages are also used in this region. For example, local languages such as Japali and Mahri, modern Saudi Arabian languages. Arabic, of course, is the official language, in addition to a local variety of, let's say, Pidginized Arabic, which is a mix of Arabic, Urdu, Hindi, English, etc. Okay, so this is a brief description of the linguistic situation in this city. Now, let's quickly go over the analysis of public science translations. The analysis of the data reveals that some linguistic realities of the locale under study. So, for example, the majority of science translations are translations from Arabic into English, and this marks the use of English as a lingua franca in this place or in this particular locale. And this also can be taken as an indication or a sign of linguistic globalization or internationalization of the region. And finally, apart from using English as a lingua franca for communication purposes, English is also used to realize other emblematic functions, such as, for example, denoting prestige and modernity. Right? Now, regarding the translation strategies used in translating public science, the study shows that several strategies are used to convey the informative content of public science, such as, for example, transference, literal translation, generalization, omission, etc. However, the translation and content of public science contains mistranslations or inaccuracies, in other words, that negatively affect the communication of the intended informative content of the sign to its target readers. Okay, and these mistranslations can be attributed to different factors. For example, lack of linguistic competence on the part of the translator, improper use of translation strategies, in addition to the linguistic differences between English and Arabic. So now I'll go just over some examples, okay? The use of transference. Transference is a widely used technique in translating public science. And it is actually a process through which a source language word is transferred into the target language using transliteration, in the sense that the transferred word will be written in the alphabets or in the characters of the target language. And normally, new concepts, proper names, culture-specific items are transferred. unless they have recognized or standard equivalence. So for example, if we look at text number 1 and text number 2, so text number 1, this is the sign. So I try to represent the text on the sign as it is. So it is the name of a place, Pizza Inn. I assume everybody is familiar with this. And it is translated into Arabic by transliteration or transference, writing the name in the alphabets of the target language. In text number 2, it involves the use or the translation of two cultural items or culture-specific items. I think, and these two are local dishes which are related to a specific culture, right? So both words are translated by transference, by transliteration, as I said, by writing them in the alphabet of the target language. And this is expected, given the fact that these do not exist
Can we make
English.
it brief, please?
Okay, right, I'll try to skip some slides. The use of word-for-word translation, and this is also quite popular or common strategy. But the thing is that when it is used, people normally do not consider the linguistic differences between, for example, English and Arabic, as in text 4, for example. If you look at text 4, this is the sign of and it is a name of a shop. ركن الصباح للتسوق السريع, for example, is translated into English as الصباح shopping rabbit. So, I mean, this is, of course, ungrammatical structure in English. This, from a grammatical perspective, lexically and semantically, the word rabbit cannot be used as an appropriate equivalent to السريع here. So a better translation would be something like الصباح express shopping. Another improper use of literal translation is that people use it in cases where transliteration should be used. Like here, for example, Fata'ir al-Jazeera. So al-Jazeera here is a name of a place actually, and it should be transliterated, not translated. So the right translation should be something like Al-Jazeera pies, not island pies.
Okay, I think we have to close.
Can I go ahead?
No, time is up. Actually, we have passed the time. So how much do you have more?
Can I continue? Dr. Yasser?
So we kindly request you to cut short since we are running out of time.
Just your closing words, and we are moving on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Can I continue? Oh, should I stop?
Sorry. We are running out of time, and we have to close, and we are moving on to the next person.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much for listening. And this is my email address. In case you want to contact me, please do so. Thank you very much again, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Riani. And now, Ms. Ola, are you there?
Yes,
Ola
I'm
Mansoor. Yeah,
Yes.
It's your turn now.
Okay.
Language contact theory in translation.
Okay.
Over to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning from Morocco. First of all, I would like to thank the conference committee for their efforts to organize this event, and it is an honor to participate with you in this webinar. I introduce myself. I am Ola Mansour Al-Babili, a PhD scholar at Ibn Zohar University, Agadir, Morocco, and a faculty member of Amran University, Yemen. My topic today is about language contact theory and translation. I'll try to be concise, clear, and simple to give you this new theory. And I'll start with an overview of language contact. Then I move to present the main subject, which is language contact theory and translation. Do you watch the slide? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. First, what is language contact? Language contact is the movement of conflict between two or more languages in the same person or the same society. Its effect could be positive as it could be negative. Language contact could be the main reason for enrichment of language, as could be the cause of its death. Of course, Reich was the first researcher of the 20th century who was interested in language contact. He defined the phenomena of bilingual as the practice of alternately using two languages, and the interference phenomena as those instances of deviation from the norm of either language which occur in the speech of bilinguals as a result of their familiarity with more than one language, as a result of language contact. And he considered both of them as the degree of difference between the two languages. In which domain language contact could be related? Language contact is a multi-dimensional, multidisciplinary field in which interrelationship holds the key to understanding of how and why people use language the way they do. Manifestation of language contact are found in a great variety of domains, including language acquisition, language processing and protection, conversation and discourse, social function of language and language policy, typology and language change, and more, and of course, translation. What are the languages that may be affected by language contact? Of course, all language may be affected, especially when they are coexisting in the same society or place or even in the same mind. When does contact language happen? Language contact happens when speakers of different languages interact closely. It's typical for their language to influence each other. It could also happen just in the same person. When Reich affirmed that linguistic diversity began next door, nay at home, and within one and the same man. It is not enough to point out that each individual is a battlefield for conflicting linguistic and habit, and at the same time a permanent source of linguistic interference. What is the result? The result of language contact at the best condition is the potential is the adaptation of other language features. But the influence can go deeper, extending to the exchange of even basic characteristics of a language, such as morphology and grammar. It could also lead to language endangerment or extinction, where one language could be disappear or exposed to death or substitute to another language. There are some phenomena of language contact: pidgin, Creole, code switching, code mixing, loan translation, calc, language transfer. Now we will move to our topic, which is language contact theory. What relation between language contact and language contact theory and translation? Translation, as we know, translation is the classic instance of language contact. It is the place of language contact par excellence, where two system linguistics interact in the brain of the translator. George Mona affirmed that translation is a language contact where we can see examples of deviation from the standard of each of the two languages. So, language contact theory supposes that there has an impact from the source language on the target language in translation, where the translator unconsciously transfers some patterns of source language to the target language. And just only when the translator has a high competence and a high awareness of the difference between the two languages, she or he can avoid this interference. This phenomena exists always around the age and has its root in Arabic with Arabic thinker or linguist. For example, الجاحظ say واللغتان إذا التقتا في اللسان الواحد أدخلت كل واحدة منهما الضيم على صاحبتها. And when two languages get together in one tongue, each one of them will suffer an oppression from the other. Ibn Khaldun also tackled the question of lack of language competence due to bilingualism. He said, فإذا تقدمت في اللسان ملكة العجمة صار مقصرا في اللغة العربية. التوحيدي discuss this issue, the issue of difference between language and the necessity to respect each other, each language. He also stressed the need to know the source language in order to translate and don't distort the meaning. He affirmed also the necessity to follow the people's speech a bit in the target language, the pragmatic issue. And there are the level of language contact. Language contact can affect all levels of language, like phonetic, phonologic, morphologic, lexical, syntactic, grammatical, stylistic, cultural, and even punctuation. We will arrive to the last diapo, which how could we avoid language contact in translation? There are some solutions or some principles which help the translator to avoid language contact. First, language proficiency of translator. A real translator have or should know both language perfectly. Number two, translation competence. A good bilingual are not necessarily good translator because translation has its method, skills, and strategy that must be acquired. Third, cultural expertise. Translators should have the same cultural background in both language. Fourth, language independence, which means the bilingual's ability to keep his language distinct in the production of his speech.
Okay, Ola, excuse
I
me.
hope that I am clear, and thank you for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much. So now the presentations are over. What next? Do we take any questions now? Do we have time? I suppose we have time.
Actually, Professor Yasin Ashraf, do you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Can you allow me to say some words, please?
Okay, how?
Hello, Professor Yasin.
Yeah, please.
Do you allow me to say some words?
Yeah, okay. Super.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And Dr. Safa, are you there? Dr. Safa, do you hear me? Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, yes,
Do you hear me?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. Dr. Safa, on behalf of the organizing committee and on my personal behalf, we are so sorry for the way you were interrupted. And actually, it was not intentionally done because it's a virtual conference and there is a kind of miscommunication and misunderstanding. So we are so sorry because look, we are now here and the chair is somewhere else and you are somewhere else. So there is a kind of miscommunication and misunderstanding. And the intention of the comparing person was like that, to remind you that we are running out of time and you can wind up in 3 or 5 minutes, then we can go to the paper presenters. So we are so sorry, we didn't mean it. Your talk was very informative. And now, Professor Yasin, Dr. Safa can go on for 5 minutes to finalize everything. And if people have questions, they can ask. So please, Dr. Yasin, go on.
Okay, sure. Dr. Safa, we are sorry about that. You can go on and finish that, and probably if you had time, take questions because people wanted to ask you certain things very, very much. Okay, then. Please, Dr. Safa.
Actually, I have a question, Dr. Safa. Can I start?
Yes.
Yeah, you were talking about translation quality assessment. And sometimes it's very difficult to assess the quality of translation, especially illiterate translation or when we translate literary text, because every translator will have his or her own way of analyzing the text, because translation is, what can I say, translation is a kind of subjectivity and objectivity at the same time, isn't it? So how can we assess the quality of translation? And can we apply also and use theories when we assess the quality of translation? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. The theories led us to translation quality assessment models. And I have already introduced 3 major influential applicable models that many studies have been conducted on these models. So if I'd like to assess or evaluate a text, I need a model, not a theory, because the model is based on theory. So, and I have already mentioned that these 3 major models are, in my point of view, are the best models in assessing and evaluating and putting judgments on translated texts. Yes.
Yeah, clear. Thank you. Clear.
Okay, there was one Ahmed Muhammad who wanted to ask a question earlier.
Who would like to ask, sir? People can, excuse me, you can unmute yourself and ask question if you have.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, this is Ahmed. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everyone. I am a faculty member at the Mad University Faculty of Arts English Department. Right now, I am doing a PhD at Banaras Hindu University. I wanted to ask Safa ma'am about the same question that Mr. Isa put 2 times, which is, what difference does it make for a translator to know about theories? I want to hear from Safa ma'am about this issue. I want to hear her opinion about it and to enlighten us with her experience, because I know for sure that she has been working as a translator for so many years, and she must have gone through this translation without knowing the translation theories, and then after knowing about translation theories. What is the difference and how can it be beneficial for me as a translator? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for asking, Mr. Ahmed. As I already answered Dr. Isa, theories were the basic environment or the way that translation quality assessment models can see light. So theory or literary, for example, translation criticism give us methods towards subjectivity. Yes, they said, for example, this text is not translated well, but it didn't show us why it is not translated well. What are the mistakes? So translation quality assessment models, you can say, give us an empirical ground, solid empirical ground for assessing the translated text. So it gives us a system to evaluate and assess translated texts, because it provides us with methods, parameters, linguistic approaches to evaluate texts. Yes.
Okay, anyone, or shall we conclude?
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me.
Please.
I have a question on linguistic landscape. So can I ask the question?
To whom?
To the former presenter.
Ula?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Carry on.
Shall I go on?
Yeah, please, make it brief, please.
Okay. My question is, how does it becomes an issue closely related to linguistic landscape research? The translation, only translation.
Yes,
yeah, that's to Dr. Ali. Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah, we can.
Yes, I'm Dr. Ibrahim Jibril, Department of Translation, University of Science and Technology, Hodeidah. I'm asking Dr. Safa for the model of the strategies that she has presented. We can say that this model will be applicable for all of the genres, translation, text, the text that we translate, and this model can be applicable for there is a recommendation for one particular genre for this model.
Okay, no, that question, the earlier question remains unanswered. It was to, I think, suppose it was to Dr. Ali Al-Briani on linguistic landscape. Anyway,
Yes.
anyone who is available can answer.
She is not available now, Dr. Safa?
Yes, I am available.
Yeah, okay, please.
Yes. Okay, House mentioned that in her book, Past and Present, which has been published in 2015, that her model is applicable to different genres, okay? And in my study, I also collected different studies that have studied and applied Julian House's model. It has been applied to legal texts, business texts, literary texts, and many other types of texts. And all of them agreed that her model is applicable to all the types of texts. And I told you I have applied it to texts of literary genre.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So,
Thank you, Dr. Yasin Ashraf, for sharing the session. I also thank Dr. Safa